Go ahead and get started. Good morning from Northwest Arkansas. My plan was to sit out on my deck with the woods behind me, but the rain is looming in and out, so I decided to put a virtual background on my screen. It's one of my favorite views in Arkansas, so I put that there. I hope everyone has had a good conference so far, and I hope you get something from this. The title of my presentation is Transforming Minds Through Hands-on Learning. Let's look a little bit. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am the Assistant Director of North Arkansas College Adult Education. And as the Assistant Director, I am the lead GED instructor of our program. I am the DL coordinator. I'm a family literacy liaison. I'm a career development facilitator. I'm a pinch hitter. So if the director isn't available, I field questions or calls. If a teacher needs a substitute, I fill in. I'm a cheerleader for our students. I'm an algebra ace and a grammar guru. Now, I list all these things not to put the spotlight on me and talk about all the things that I am doing, but all of us in this field, as instructors especially, but every one of us in our programs, we wear so many different hats. How many hats do you wear? I taught part-time 14 years in a county associated with the program where I'm at now. And I wore as many hats there because I was the main instructor in the building. So it doesn't matter if you're part-time, if you're full-time, doesn't matter what your title is. We all have to wear different hats from time to time. And sometimes we wear several hats at the same time. So you're busy, I'm busy. And sometimes when we're really busy, fun hands-on lessons are just the ticket for our classroom. Benjamin Franklin said, "Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember. Involve me and I learn." So I hope you get from information from today about how students can be involved in learning. I put in my description that when we do hands-on learning, it takes the role of the teacher and moves the teacher into the facilitator role. And a facilitator role being one who guides. And it helps the students then become the teacher. They learn from their hands-on experience. They learn from each other. They help each other and guide each other. So let's jump into some of the lessons that I have done in my class, and I got some others from partnering teachers. We enjoy doing these different types of lessons on Thursdays because our normal week is Monday through Thursday, and Thursday is always a good time to have something fun and extra. The first one is popcorn math.
Idea that you would have a group of 4 students sitting together in a configuration of 4 desks. And so like a little group of 4. And you have one student that you're sitting next to. That's your elbow partner, is the one whose desk is next to you. And then you have another set of desks kind of across from you. And so there's one student that sits across from you at their desk and is looking back at you. And that's your eyeball partner. Your elbow partner is the one next to you. Your eyeball partner is the one across from you. And so a lot of times teachers are very strategic about who they put as a child's elbow partner and a child's eyeball partner. Often they'll put a like ability person, so someone with a similar ability level, in as the elbow partner, and someone who might be a challenge to them as the eyeball partner. And so throughout the lesson, throughout the day, the teacher can say, okay, in this activity, I want you to turn to your elbow partner and do this or answer this question or talk about this. Or they might say, okay, now I want you to look at your eyeball partner and have a conversation about this. This type of partnering or grouping is key to differentiation. So Tomlinson says, in a differentiated classroom, the teacher uses many different group configurations over time, and students experience many different working groups and arrangements. Okay, and so the idea is,
I think we crossed over somebody else's presentation. I thought this lady was adding to my presentation and decided to give us an idea of how to group people. I will get back to popcorn math. That was very unusual. So popcorn math allows the opportunity for students to discover things which aren't always as they seem. It teaches volumes of a cylinder, and it allows students to use their formula sheet. One thing that I have, yes, Todd, I'm confused too. I don't know where that came from. I thought she was just adding to my presentation, but I think she was supposed to be in another presentation. But I will continue. What's the first rule of teaching? Monitor and adjust. And that is with any kind of situation. And so we'll just move forward. One thing I do with my students is I want to make sure they have all the tools that they can have for when they are in the classroom, so that they'll know how to use those tools when they go into the testing situation. So I want to make sure that our students know how to use the formula sheet and how to find information on it, and also how to use a calculator. The formula sheet, I always tell my students, it has a lot of information on it, but it's not something that they have to memorize. Now, if they happen to know some of the formulas, that's great, but they don't have to know all of them or even any of them. What I try to do is teach my students how to find the formulas on the formula sheet. At the top of the page, you have area, the middle of the page, surface area and volume, and towards the bottom of the page, your algebraic formulas. This lesson can also be adapted to teach economics. At the end of this lesson, what I will often do is talk about shapes of packaging. And one of my favorite examples, talk about cereal, go to the cereal aisle and how the packages are all different, prices are different, or maybe not. Toothpaste aisle, same thing. And then things like jars, such as mayonnaise jars, have a divot in the bottom of them, and they've gotten deeper, and so we don't get as much for our money. So any of these lessons can be adapted and added to. Please do not take what I give and just say, oh, this is the only way to do it. Please add anything you want to it as well. So some of the vocabulary we will use in this lesson is cylinder, volume, and we'll use the volume formula, pi r squared times height. And we'll talk about what a hypothesis is, because our students will need to hypothesize. The materials needed are printer paper, popped popcorn, paper towels, which are optional, or you can give them extra paper, and tape. The reason you want to make sure they either have paper towels or printer paper is they are going to make cylinders from the printer paper, and they're not going to have bottoms on them. So when they use the cylinder to put the popcorn into, they need something that will catch the popcorn at the bottom, or there will be popcorn all over the place. The instructions for this particular lesson, students will each need 2 pieces of paper. They will make 2 cylinders, one rolled on the long edge and the other rolled on the short edge. So they will have a tall, skinny cylinder, and they will have a short, fat cylinder. And when you teach them to roll these, they need to bring their edges to each other. Do not cross them over, because that changes the size of the cylinder. So the question I ask, which cylinder has a larger volume, or are they equal? And I'll put maybe tallies on the board, asking each student what their answer is to this question. So many times students believe they're equal because you use the same size paper to make each of these cylinders. Then you give each student a bag of popcorn and a paper towel. I often will pop the popcorn at home and take it with me. Sometimes when I've had smaller groups, maybe give the students a bag and let them go pop it on a break, whatever you choose, but using microwave popcorn is usually the best. Allow students to then experiment and find their answer. And it's really interesting to walk around the classroom and watch students when they get to this point of the lesson, because some of them, they'll take the popcorn and they'll pour it in one of the cylinders, then they'll pour it in another cylinder, and then I'll say, well, which one holds more? And they look at it and go, well, I don't know. Then they'll have some who count the kernels, which takes a long time, but they do. And I explain to students in all of these lessons that we do, there is no wrong way to do this. Because again, they're trying to discover for themselves what works. So there's nothing wrong with counting out the kernels, except it does take a while. There is a more efficient way to do this and find the information and gather the information, and that is to fill the skinny cylinder, put the fat cylinder around it, lift the skinny cylinder, and watch the popcorn fall into the other cylinder. Then you'll know which one is bigger. That's the most efficient way. But again, there are many different ways, and I've had students do it other ways and get the answer that they need. And again, you can expand on this lesson. I expand on it using economics. We talk about, this packaging might look like it has more, but then again, if you look at it a little closer, it might not. And so again, you can expand this lesson and do whatever you want with it to help your students understand things like this. Packaging is made for many different reasons, the way it is. The next lesson I'm going to talk about is an exothermic reaction lesson. And this is an experiment using basic kitchen equipment and safe materials. And this is one our students really enjoy. The vocabulary that we will cover is exothermic, endothermic, mixture, solution, solute, heat, energy. Now, again, how you present this information is up to you. When I do the popcorn math, I often don't talk about the volume and such until we get to the end in the formula, because again, I want them to discover information. So sometimes lessons, you want to upload the vocabulary on the front end so they have an idea of what you're talking about as you go through the lesson. But sometimes you want to upload the vocabulary on the back end of the lesson. And then sometimes in the middle, this is all up to you and how you choose to do this. With this particular lesson, it does get a little loud in the class. So uploading the vocabulary at the beginning often helps. The materials you need are half and half, sugar, vanilla, ice, gallon freezer bags, quart freezer bags, ice cream salt, a 1 cup measure, teaspoons, and digital laser thermometers. And then we have a stopwatch or timer, and when they need somewhere to log their information. So the lesson is, again, about endothermic and exothermic reactions. We begin with explanation of what these two terms mean, and we can include other vocabulary as needed or wanted. And we may use various math and measure components throughout this lesson. So the recipe includes a cup of half and half, 1 to 3 teaspoons of sugar, and a teaspoon of vanilla. What we normally do is we will use plastic spoons in our class, and that way each student has his own spoon for sugar and then for eating the ice cream at the end. And then a teaspoon of vanilla can be measured out in the lid of the vanilla jar, the bottle. So we need to place the half and half, the sugar and the vanilla in a quart bag. Then we place that bag that's zipped up into a gallon bag, which is half full of ice. Then we top that bag with ice and then add salt and then close that bag. We need to measure the temperature and the time. And then the students roll the bags around in their hands until the ice cream is at its desired thickness. Now, this is where it does get loud in the classroom, because when you have bags of ice being shaken and rolled around, it's really fascinating to watch the students. They get tickled sometimes because this does get really cold. You also want to have paper towels on hand to wipe up any condensation that might happen too, because some students may need to do that. Then at the end, once they get to the point of the thickness they want, the students record their temperature and time, and they compare both the starting temperature and the time that it took. Then they can eat and enjoy. M&M math lesson is one that we all have often done the same day as the exothermic lesson, because who doesn't like M&Ms in their ice cream? I know there are a few, but oftentimes students enjoy it. So for the M&M math lesson, this allows students to gather and report data, and it can be adjusted from a short, simple lesson to one that's very extensive. I've done this lesson for years. I learned it at a training that I did years ago. And if you just have a small amount of time, just do some of the information. Just gather some of the data. If you have an extended amount of time, this particular lesson can take up a whole class time. So it's up to you and what you want to do. The vocabulary we use are data, ratio, proportion, percent, probability, outliers, measures of center, table, dot plot, bar graph, circle graph, plot and whisker graph, and scatter plots. Now, if you'll notice, some of these are in black and some are in white. The ones that are in black are ones that I have used. And then as I was putting together this presentation, I thought, well, there are some other ways we can use this. And I know that there are even more. So it depends on how you want to teach this or what you want to do with it, because the possibilities are definitely endless for this particular lesson. You need plain M&Ms. Now, this can be either in a small bag, or you could get a large bag and measure out. Now, you want a measuring tool, which is either I would do a quarter cup or a third a cup. I did the third a cup the other day. It gives them quite a bit. It makes for large graphs, but a quarter cup or even a flat scoop. It can't just be a regular spoon because your data will be skewed. Because if you use if you use something where you can level off the measurement, then everybody gets about the same amount. You need paper towels, printed graph paper, and I just go online and find a free graph that I can print, scissors, colored pencils and markers, and tape. And then if you want to do the circle graph, you'll need poster board or presentation paper. Earlier, well, I guess it was last week, we did this in my class, and we have the presentation paper that's a Post-it that you can stick on the wall, and the students made their circle graphs and put them on the wall. The instructions are to give students a small bag or a scoop of M&Ms. They're to sort the M&Ms by color. We record the data in a table on the board, and I'll let the students do that unless you don't want students up and around. You can record it as the teacher, but this way it gets the students moving around a little bit. They then organize a dot plot on their paper towel with their M&Ms in the different colors. Then we transfer this data to graph paper in the form of a bar graph. So they get colored pencils and they make bars for each representative of each of the numbers of M&Ms that they have. And as we go through all of this, we're discussing the different aspects of what we're dealing with. Once we do the table on the board, we can talk about ratios, proportions, percents, so many things right there. If that's all you want to teach is about tables, because sometimes our students struggle reading tables. That's a great opportunity to really just kind of branch off and do a lot of different lessons there. But after I do the graph, after I have them color their bar graph, I have them cut out their bars, and then they take the bars end to end. Again, do not overlap them. But once they put them end to end and make a long strand, then they bring them back together and if they'll do it with the colors inside the circle, it makes it a little easier for them. Then they make a circle graph, and they can draw the circle graph and color in the different wedges and match the bar graph. So what we are doing here is we're taking the same information, putting it on a table, we're putting it on a dot plot, we're putting it in a bar graph, and we're putting a circle graph. So often our students think that all of this information is different, but we're showing them that it's the same. You can gather the same information from different types of graphs. And again, you could do centers of measure, you could do box and whisker plots. I mean, again, so many other choices. The possibilities are definitely endless with this particular lesson. Now in the spring, we did an egg experiment. This one's a little different. It allows for various subjects to be adapted and used. It allows for osmosis to be demonstrated. It requires measurements of mass to be taken, allowing for math. The egg is a single cell, so we're talking about biology, and the covering or the shell is made of calcium carbonate. So this particular lesson, we can talk about math and science, and the reaction allows for its removal by an acid, which is vinegar. The egg has an inner water permeable membrane, which we will discuss during the lesson. So the vocabulary needed: acid and base, membrane, calcium carbonate, hydronium, which is an acid, hydroxide, which is a base, osmosis, acetic acid, mass, distilled water, salt, which is NaCl. I'm sorry, I think I went a little fast there. So this is the vocabulary that we'll be covering. The materials needed for the egg experiment are eggs, of course, mason jars with lids, distilled vinegar, distilled water, salt, a scale. And of course they need a journal, because they're going to be taking data not only once, but several times, and they will need to log that and compare their notes. For the activity, the students place an egg in a small jar with a lid, cover it with distilled white vinegar. They will leave for 2 to 3 days. Now again, this is a great experiment to do on a Thursday and then revisit it on Monday, because it has to set for 2 to 3 days or until the shell is removed. Then they clean the eggs carefully, and this is very important. When we did this in the spring, we had somebody who loved his egg just a little too much, and it made this particular experiment null and void. So if you clean it too hard, it will bust. So this is very important. Clean the eggs carefully. Then the students weigh the eggs and measure the mass. They place the eggs in either distilled water, a salt water solution, or just plain salt. After a day, they will rinse again, weigh the eggs, and record the mass. The eggs can be moved through various concentrations and weighed as long as they last. So this experiment can go from a couple of days to 3 or 4, depending on what you choose. The student then can compare and post answers for the various outcomes. And it's interesting to let the students compare their notes to other students' notes to see if everybody's was similar, or if someone had different information. So we're going to now jump to more geometry and circles around us. And this is one that's I find interesting that students don't realize. When we talk about geometry, I talk about geometry being all around us. Circles are all around us. Geometry is everywhere. It's the desk we're sitting at, it's the chair we're sitting in, it's the clothes we're wearing. And geometry has, it's very distinct, it's very certain and precise. And students don't realize that these formulas that they use are because people discovered the information in nature. They discovered it from around us. In this particular lesson, students learn about the relationship of the circumference and the diameter of a circle. We talk about these formulas, but again, there's a reason that they are written as they are. The vocabulary that we use will be circumference, diameter, radius, pi, and then the formula for circumference, which is either pi d or pi r squared. And this is how it's written on the formula sheet. So if they have the diameter or the radius, they learn how to put the formula together and use it. But in this particular lesson, we're going to talk about the diameter and the circumference. The materials needed, students will need sewing tape measures. And I often put students in groups to do this. They need paper and a pen or pencil. And then they will need a calculator at the end of the lesson. And their phone is optional. And this is how I run this particular lesson, is they are put into groups. And I try to do small groups because when the group gets too big, not everybody has a job. But when you're trying to measure something with a tape measure, sometimes it takes a couple of people. But I group my students, at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 in a group. Each group will need a tape measure, paper, and pen or pencil. And then I give them a specified amount of time. And our class is on a small tech campus. And so I allow my students to move around the campus as necessary to find unique circles. The only restrictions they have, they cannot go into any offices or classrooms that are being used. Otherwise, they can go outside, they can go into the student center or wherever, or they can even stay in the classroom and measure circles. Their instructions are they are to record the circumference and diameter of various circles that they find. And I have not explained to them the relationship at this point. They are just discovering how we talk about how to measure circumference and how to measure diameter. Students can take pictures of interesting circles with themselves and email them back to me to put on the overhead or social media. What I do is I give my students a business card with my email on it, and they take pictures if they find something interesting or different. As a matter of fact, this last time I did this, I drive a Buick, and so I have a round symbol on my trunk, and my students actually took a picture of themselves with the symbol on the trunk of my car. They thought that was pretty clever, and it was. But it's kind of neat to put them on the overhead and talk about them and let them see, because every group finds different circles. Then when they come back and we discuss the findings, and again, we talk about the circumference and the diameter. And then what I do is I have them take the circumference and divide it by the diameter and ask them what they get. Now, if you've ever done this, because the formula is circumference equals pi d, or 3.14 times diameter, when they take the circumference of the circle and divide it by the diameter, they will get close to 3.14. Now, remember, pi is not an exact number. The students will not always get 3.14, but often, and sometimes if they measured wrong, they'll get something really strange. But if they've measured correctly, it will come close to 3 every time. And then we'll talk about it. We'll talk about the relationship of that formula and how it works. Another lesson that we use is we use Breakout EDU. We learned about this particular lesson in some breakout sessions in previous ACE conferences. And our students really enjoy it. And again, the possibilities are endless with it. The kit can be physically or digitally purchased, and we have both. So during COVID, when students don't really need to be near each other or moving around the classroom, the digital option has been really great. We can put students in groups or they can work individually. And you can choose from a plethora of subjects and levels. They can be anywhere from academic or just something just for fun. And our students really enjoy them. Even if it's really hard for them or they can't seem to solve it, once we talk about it, they can see how sometimes these process. I will tell you, this is one of the harder things for me because I'm not a problem solver when it comes to looking at hidden clues and such. So sometimes these can frustrate me even, but we try to choose something that our students will be successful with. Then I had some teachers who take trips with their ESL classes. Now we have some classes that are in small communities. And so our ESL teacher has taken our students to the local farmers market, which is just a couple of blocks from our class in that particular neighborhood. And the students, and as a matter of fact, this is a picture from that particular farmers market. The students didn't have to purchase anything, but they had to speak in English to the local vendors. And so they had to ask questions about the products and talk to the vendors there. Our ESL classes have taken trips to the library, to a convenience store, again, to the library to get their library card, to the convenience store to talk about purchasing things and using their English skills, to a thrift store. We had a trip to a thrift store. And the lady who was running the thrift store actually gave our students each a $5 voucher to use in the store. So again, using their English skills in everyday situations. I didn't put it on here, but we have had a teacher who likes to do art projects with her students. They watch a video and listen to very simple steps, but they have to listen in English and watch the video and listen and then put that to use in painting. Excuse me. And the final thing that I want to touch upon is that oftentimes we have guest speakers or community partners come into our classrooms. And that, again, all of what I'm talking about today, these things can be done, whether it's an ESL classroom, an ABE classroom, an ASC classroom. We try to cater to our students and what they need. And so our guest speakers could include our SNAP ENT coordinator, a CDF or a CSP, which again, I am, but sometimes it's nice to have someone else come in and talk to our students, and they like to hear someone else sometimes too. Bankers. The Cooperative Extension Service has come into our classrooms, and the Extension homemakers have actually done a presentation on how to do crock pot dinners for a family. So if you have students who are parents and would like to learn some things, but the Cooperative Extension Service has an enormous amount of resources. In the past, we have had a mock interview team come in. Other members of our staff have come in, one being a good model as to what an interviewee should do, and the other being a really bad model as to what you should not do. And the students seem to get a lot out of that because it's not putting them on the spot, but they are watching someone else, and we talk about it, and they see within these people what is good and what is not. And so then hopefully then when we do interviews with them or they go to an interview, they understand. Of course, we partner with WIOA, and we have especially the out-of-school youth. We have people from there come in and visit. We have other business and industry. I had Home Instead come in. They called me and asked if they could come and speak. Sure, we'll gladly let people come in and speak about their programs and what they have to offer. But other business and industry can come in and talk about what their business is like. And then, of course, our advisory boards are always good resources. And then other college associates, such as Career Pathways Initiative or EOC, the Educational Opportunity Center. They are in our classrooms often. And then, of course, even other instructors from other programs, again, to come in and talk to our students. We take our students, because we're on the tech campus, we can take our students to those classrooms and let them see the facilities and meet the instructors there so that they're a little more comfortable. And then sometimes students don't know what they want until they see it, so they get excited. Dr. Seuss said, "You'll never be bored when you try something new. There's really no limit to what you can do." And this is what our students need to know. When we try something new as teachers, sometimes we don't want to, but we try it, and the students can really get something out of it. One other thought that I had that I failed to put in here, I just thought of it this morning. Back when our last staff meeting we did in person, but what I did was I was able to find a PowerPoint that mimics Jeopardy, and we were able to do a Jeopardy game over policies and procedures, but that could be set up for anything in your classroom. And that's a really fun way to do a lesson as well. I do appreciate your attending. I appreciate your attention. But more importantly, I do thank you for all that you do with Adult Ed and with our students. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat or just speak up. If you have any questions just for me, my email is listed here, and you're welcome to email me, and I'll gladly answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Julie. I've put the session evaluation in chat. For those attending, please fill that out. It's very helpful to ACE.
Julie, could you see the chat and the comments that were in the chat?
Pardon?
Could you see the chat and the comments that were in the chat?
Yes.
Great.
They have any questions? If not, have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you, Julie.
Yes, ma'am.